In American society, we've all been brought up to believe that we have been given equal opportunities no matter our background or where we came from. Tonight I would like to explain for you why this is simply not true. My claim this evening is that low socioeconomic status causes learned helplessness in individuals. Learned helplessness is a perceived loss of control in otherwise escapable outcomes. This means that while there may be a solution present, those suffering from learned helplessness are unable to acknowledge its existence. Learned helplessness was first discovered by retired professor of psychology at Harvard University, Dr. B.F. Skinner. His experiments involved continually shocking animal subjects in cages for several minutes. After the several minutes, he would present a means of escape for the animals. In all cases, the animals had accepted their captivity and were unable to escape without further help from the experimenter. This same principle can be applied to humans when regarding the relationship between low socioeconomic status and learned helplessness. To illustrate this point, I will first describe how low socioeconomic status deprives children of enriching environments. Second, I will attempt to describe a correlation between these deprived environments and the continued failure of those within them. Finally, I will show how continual failure leads to resignation and acceptance of an unsatisfactory situation. To begin, low socioeconomic status creates a deprived environment for children's development. In a 2003 study by Dr. Gary Evans, researcher of childhood development, the environment of children in low socioeconomic statuses has an 88% chance of the presence of at least one detrimental factor, including marital status of the parent, highest educational level of the guardian, or general housing construction problems. Any of these detrimental factors have a positive correlation to children's negative evaluation of their own self-worth. Other than self-worth, learned helplessness was also evaluated in this study by an impossible puzzle quiz that the children attempted. The amount of time the children attempted the impossible puzzle quiz was correlated to the amount of learned helplessness they had developed from their environments. Any of the previously mentioned detrimental factors in their environments had a significant impact in the amount of time the children attempted the impossible puzzle, and therefore the amount of learned helplessness they had developed from their environments. This brings me to my second point, that children have no control over the outcomes of their world and begin to feel inhibited by their own environments. Doctorate psychology researchers for the University of Michigan found that this behavior causes negative reasoning in an individual, leading to resignation in future attempts at success. This means that these children are learning that their environment controls them, rather than they control their environment. They learn that nothing they can do will improve their situation, even if they improve upon themselves. And in another experiment, this leads to them withholding their own abilities in future attempts to protect their own self-esteem, or finding external means to explain their failures. In another experiment by Dr. Jones, psychologist of Princeton University, participants were exposed to continual perceived failure, but were then given a choice to take an inhibiting drug on the second round of testing. Almost all participants took the drug, providing an external scapegoat to relieve their own sense of failure. Through this downward spiral, we can infer how repetition of this behavior would lead to future failures over time. This brings me to my final point, that continual failure leads to overwhelming mental distress, causing not just resignation, but acceptance of unfavorable circumstances. Festinger's theory states that cognitive discomfort leads to an alteration in one's attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors to reduce the mental discomfort and restore balance. So even though an individual may be in an unsatisfactory situation, through continued exposure to failure and high emotional stress, they have learned to reevaluate their situation and accept their unsatisfactory circumstances. In conclusion, low socioeconomic status has an 88% likelihood of creating detrimental environments for children. As these children grow up in these environments, they learn they have no control over the outcomes of their worlds and must find external means to explain their failures. As they continue on this behavior and this path to failure, their emotional stress leads to changes in their attitudes, and finally, a resignation and acceptance of their circumstances. Therefore, low socioeconomic status causes learned helplessness.
All right, Sean, the propositions clearly identified. You define kind of what you're talking about as you go along. I thought that was very much appreciated. I do think you need to do a little bit more to explain what is controversial about this, because it really sounds like it's about learned behavior, and I'm not sure if it has been challenged, if there are disputes within the psychological or behavioral fields that suggest that there are other extenuating causes of this learned helplessness that you're talking about. I think one of the things that might be a little bit problematic when it comes to being an argument is that this might be true of many people, but is it true of most or all? So is it a generalization that we're making? And how many exceptions do we have to have before we start questioning whether or not this is valid in explaining most people's behaviors? I think you're a little dependent on kind of laboratory research. I think you need to have some more general sociological data to be able to make these generalizations, although the theories are all clearly explained. The statistic that you cite about 88% says there's an 88% chance that somebody's going to have one of those detrimental factors. It didn't necessarily say that having one of those detrimental factors automatically results in the learned helplessness, and I think that that's, it contributes to it definitely, but I didn't hear the same level of statistical confidence in the second part of the inference there. So I think that that's probably a place where the response speaker will be focusing some attention on. You did a good job citing the theorists, although I didn't get any dates on this. Some of this information is probably substantially old. I mean, I was studying some of the psychologists that you mentioned there when I was in college, so I know that it's at least 40 years old on some of those theories. So I think the more updated information especially ought to be cited by date. The generalizations, I think, you explain the theory pretty well. A lot of reading. I think you need to talk to us a little bit more, but I did think that all of the arguments that you were making were clear, and you had a very nice summary, and you did exactly what we asked you to, was remind us what the point was that you were trying to make at the end. All right, thank you.